Bury your guns at Wounded Knee. Lou Rockwell of the Mises Institute recently described one of our government's first experiences in disarming a group of Americans. December 29, 2012 marked the 122nd anniversary of the murder of 297 Sioux Indians at the Wounded Knee Creek on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. These 297 people in their winter camp were murdered by federal agents and members of the 7th Cavalry who had come to confiscate their firearms for their own safety and protection. The slaughter began after the majority of the Sioux had peacefully turned in their firearms. The cavalry began shooting and managed to wipe out the entire camp. 200 of the 297 victims were women and children. About 40 members of the 7th Cavalry were killed, but over half of them were victims of fratricide from the Mochkis guns of their overzealous comrade in arms. 20 members of the 7th Cavalry Death Squad were deemed national heroes and rewarded the Medal of Honor for their acts of heroism. More like cowardice. We hear very little of Wounded Knee today. It is usually not mentioned in our history classes or books. What little that does exist about Wounded Knee is normally a sanitized official government explanation, and there are several historically inaccurate depictions of the events leading up to the massacre that appear in movie scripts and are not the least bit representative of the actual events that took place that day. Wounded Knee was not the first federally backed gun confiscation attempts in the United States history. It ended in the senseless murder of 297 people. Before you jump on the emotionally charged bandwagon for gun control, take a moment to reflect on the real purpose of the Second Amendment, the right of the people to take up arms in defense of themselves, their families, and their property in the face of invading armies or an oppressive government. The argument that the Second Amendment only applies to hunting and target shooting is asinine. When the United States Constitution was drafted, hunting was the everyday chore carried out by men and women to put meat on their table each night, and target shooting was an unheard of concept. Musket balls were a precious commodity and were certainly not wasted on target shooting. The Second Amendment was written by people who fled oppressive and tyrannical regimes in Europe, and it refers to the right of American citizens to be armed for the defensive purposes should such tyranny arise in the United States. As time goes forward, the average citizen in the United States continues to lose little chunks of personal freedom or liberty. Far too many times, unjust gun control bills were passed and signed into law under the guise of "for your safety" or "for your protection." The Patriot Act was signed into law by G.W. Bush and was expanded and continues under Barack Obama. It is just one of the many examples of American citizens being stripped of their rights and privacy for their safety and protection. Now, the right to keep and bear arms is on the table, and it will most likely be attacked to facilitate the path to the removal of our firearms, in all in the name of our safety and protection. Before any American citizen blindly accepts whatever new firearm legislation that is about to be doled out, they should stop and think about something for just 1 minute. Evil does exist in our world. It always has and always will. Throughout history, evil people have committed evil acts. Evil exists all around us, but looking back into the historical records of the past 200 years across the globe, where is evil and malevolence most often profound? In the hands of those with the power, the governments. The greatest human tragedies on record and the target loss of innocent lives can be attributed to governments. Who do the governments always target? Scapegoats and enemies within their own borders, but only after they have been disarmed to the point where they can no longer pose a threat. Ask any Native American, and they will tell you it was an inferior technology and lack of arms that contributed to their demise. Ask any Armenian why it was so easy for the Turks to exterminate millions of them, and they will answer, we were disarmed before it happened. Ask any Jew what Hitler's first step prior to the mass murders of the Holocaust was. Confiscate the firearms of the people. Wounded Knee is the prime example of why the Second Amendment exists and why we should vehemently resist any attempts to infringe on our rights to bear arms. Without the Second Amendment, we will be totally stripped of any ability to defend ourselves and our families. That was the end of Lou Rockwell's story. A little gun history. Disarming the public can be deadly. The history is just the 20th century of what government can do to the people when those people don't agree with or oppose them is quite sobering. Considering what you think about the present socialist government's campaign to disarm the American people. In 1929, the Soviet Union established gun control. From 1929 to 1953, about 20 million dissidents, unable to defend themselves, were rounded up and exterminated. In 1911, Turkey established gun control. From 1915 to 1917, 1.5 million Armenians, unable to defend themselves, were rounded up and exterminated. Germany established gun control in 1938. From 1939 to 1945, a total of 1.3 million Jews and others who were unable to defend themselves were rounded up and exterminated. China established gun control in 1935. From 1948 to 1952, 20 million political dissidents unable to defend themselves were rounded up and exterminated. Guatemala established gun control in 1964. From 1964 to 1981, 100,000 Mayan Indians unable to defend themselves were rounded up and exterminated. Uganda established gun control in 1970. From 1971 to 1979, 300,000 Christians unable to defend themselves were rounded up and exterminated. Cambodia established gun control in 1956. From 1975 to 1977, 1.5 million educated people, i.e. half the population, unable to defend themselves, were rounded up and exterminated. Defenseless people rounded up and exterminated in the 20th century because of gun control, 56 million. Yet you won't see this data on the U.S. Evening News or hear pro-gun control politicians disseminating this information. Guns in the hands of honest civilians save lives and property, and yes, gun control laws adversely affect only law-abiding citizens. Take note, my fellow Americans, before it is too late. The next time someone talks in favor of gun control, please remind them of this history lesson. With guns, we are citizens. Without them, we are subjects. During World War II, the Japanese decided not to invade America because they know Americans were armed. Switzerland issues every household a rifle, and a Swiss government trains every adult they issue a gun to how to use it. Switzerland has the lowest gun-related crime rate any civilized country of the world. It is a no-brainer. Don't let our government waste billions of our tax dollars in an effort to make all law-abiding citizens an easy target. Remember, the 56 million people in the last century who, unable to defend themselves, were rounded up and exterminated. I know this has been long, folks, but I'm coming to the conclusion. Conclusion. The greatest threat to America's Constitution, freedom, way of life, and future as a free people is now moving into high gear as Barack Hussein Obama and his socialist far-left allies, aided and abetted by the establishment and its wholly owned liberat media propaganda machine, move to convert America into a socialist police state. Remember, this is right-wing, this is not libertarian. We can agree with a lot of this stuff, but come on. Even the right wing dealt this shit into everything. I will continue. The final nail in America's coffin will be the registration, confiscation of America's firearms. The communists have long known that they could not subjugate America to a totalitarian dictatorship a la former Soviet Union or Nazi Germany unless and until they could confiscate 300 to 400 million firearms in the hands of 70 to 80 million Americans. The opposition to such a disarming of the American people, while diminishing, is still formidable. Notwithstanding massive pressure for total gun control from the potential left, liberal media, the Democratic Party, and the global socialist establishment, including the United Nations, Americans have a heritage, tradition, and belief in self-defense that was birthed out of our founding fathers over 200 years ago, and almost part of our national gene pool. They also have a love for liberty and hatred of tyranny passed down from our founding fathers because of their loathing for European monarchies and advocated strangling of the people's freedom. However, the Americans can be seduced or deceived into giving up their freedoms and heritage in live primary ways. 1. Lull them to sleep with decades of uninterrupted prosperity. That is now ending. Undermine their patriotism, morality, culture, and spiritual life as a people in order to weaken their resolve to remain free. The Stalin, Gramsci, Saul Alinsky long-term strategy for gradually grinding down America. Okay, never heard of that one, but there it is. Get the large number of Americans, now almost half, dependent on government handouts, welfare, food stamps, and monthly checks, i.e. corrupt them with government benefits. Indeed, states like California, Hawaii, New Mexico, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, Illinois, Ohio, Kentucky, New York, and Maine have more people on welfare than they do people employed. When the national welfare level reaches over 50% of the people, and we are almost there, we as a nation will have reached an irreversible death spiral. Dumb down the American people via television, especially liberal establishment-controlled propaganda and brainwashing movies, non-stop entertainment, and a liberal, socialist, secular, humanist educational system whereby the dumbed-down majority can no longer think, discern, or tell difference between good and evil. Like I say, turn off the TV. Use it for background noise. That's all I use it for. Just background noise, something in the background. Allow, take advantage of, or even precipitate a series of horrendous events, bombings, terrorist attacks, mass shootings, etc., in order to traumatize the controlled media and to create an atmosphere of hysteria, fear, and emotional outrage. Sorry, I'm reading off of a copy. It's not great. Resulting in and accepted by the people, draconian new government controls over the people, issued with the promise of government protect from and secure for all Americans. Would the present regime, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Would the present regime in Washington use the recent services of mass shooting, culminating in, but probably not ending with, the Sandy Hook massacre of 20 elementary school children to stampede Americans into accepting draconian new gun control, registration, and confiscation? Indeed, that is exactly what it is doing at this time. And if Obama, Biden, and the liberals cannot steamroll massive gun control through the Congress, which still has to answer to the electorate, they have promised to do it via a series of presidential executive orders, 23 of which have already been written and are ready to be signed. The fact that such orders are unconstitutional is now irrelevant to the present countdown to the emerging dictatorship. You've pretty much got the idea. We've got the current regime in with House Bill, I can't even remember. They're trying to inhibit the sheriff's ability to arrest people. This is where we need to stop it, because the sheriffs do not answer at all to the federal government, not to the president, not to any higher authority, but we the people, and the Constitution that they swore an oath to defend. Sorry it was so long, but I felt I needed to get the information out there. Peace out, folks. And this was part of the problem during the video. He just had to have some attention. And he's not happy now. One fat ass cat.
peace.